Well, I could say that our presenter today needs no introduction, but if that's the case, what am I doing up here? But Chuck Denney's been the director of the City of Tumwater Parks and Recreation Department for many years now. And I might add that he has been a very busy director, overseeing a plethora of city parks and multiple events and projects and advisory boards that he's in charge of, many behind-the-scenes jobs that put a lot on his plate. In fact, if his life were a tablecloth, it would be a mess. I mean, that's how full his plate is. But he does it. He does it all with a. He does it all with a smile, or at least whenever I'm with him, he's smiling, and it's nice to work with him. One of the projects that's been taking up a lot of his time is the extension of the Thurston County trail system as it comes through Tumwater, and this part of the overall trail plan brings it through the Tumwater Falls Park on the historic narrow gauge railway grade that parallels the Deschutes Parkway, just below the shoulder of the Deschutes Parkway and between there and our trails down in the park. It's a nice level ground where the railroad routes come. Well, he's going to tell about it. So, shall I tell all the stories, Dave? Okay, all right. But the groundbreaking for that new trail system following that route is going to be taking place soon. Soonish, and it's going to be, we're going to get a combination history talk and project update. But I also not only want to introduce Chuck Denney, but also his boss, Mayor Pete Combate. And would you like to say a few words, or you can hold this?
Thank you, Don. Again, I'm Pete Combate, Mayor of Tumwater. Welcome to Tumwater. This is a wonderful program that we collaborate and help fund with the Olympia Tumwater Foundation. So we really appreciate the partnership we've had with them over the last several years. It's been certainly my vision and the vision of the council to have a trail along the river valley for years, and we've been really struggling with trying to figure out how to make it happen because it's very expensive. This is not, this is pristine ground that we're disturbing. We were very fortunate a couple of years ago to secure some federal grant money for a little piece of it, which Chuck is going to talk about. And this is really the first major new segment. We did a little bit through Historic Park on a walking path down there a few years ago, but this is the first really pristine new area that we will be putting a trail in. And so I'm just thrilled and excited that we're almost there. We've still got a few issues to work out, as you'll probably learn about, but this will be a great addition. As I've walked through the Falls Park, it's always been, why can't we connect to that historic park down below? And this will be an opportunity to do that. So I'm looking forward to this talk as well as you are. And so again, thanks for coming.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Combate. I'm very excited to be here. Don had asked me probably 6 months ago if I'd come talk about the Deschutes Valley Trail at the noon history talk. And I said, well, sure, I could talk about that trail plan for hours. And then as it got closer, it started to transition into, hey, and could you talk about the history of the railroad? Which, of course, it's not my specialty, but working with Don and a number of other people, I've learned quite a bit about the railroad. We've tried to incorporate the history of the railroad into our trail plan that we're working on. And just a quick show of hands, how many people have even heard of the Deschutes Valley Trail? Very good, very good. Yeah, so let's start off. I'll give you a little explanation of what's going on, and I hope you can kind of see there in the back. Here's sort of a summary of the Deschutes Valley Trail. It's about 2.68 miles long from end to end, starting at the southern end in Tumwater. People familiar with Pioneer Park on Henderson Boulevard? Yes, okay. It starts at Pioneer Park, crosses the Deschutes River, and enters property that borders the Tumwater Valley Golf Course, follows the golf course to Deschutes Valley Park, which is at the end of T Street. That's one of the city's newest parks that will also serve as a trailhead to the Deschutes Valley Trail. From the Deschutes Valley Park, it travels again along the golf course and into the city's watershed in the Palermo Valley and connects to the Palermo neighborhood, the Palermo Neighborhood Park, and also through the watershed and up to a trailhead and a parking lot, which we've already constructed just behind Burger King on Capitol Boulevard. So that's another place where you'll be able to access the trail. from the Palermo neighborhood, again traveling along the golf course and then crossing a waterway and bordering the Tumwater Valley Athletic Club. The trail goes up Tumwater Valley Drive in front of what will be the city's new craft brewing and distilling center at the top of Tumwater Valley Drive. Crosses E Street, which is the street that goes down into what was the former brewery warehouse yard. Follows the river and crosses underneath Capitol Boulevard into Tumwater Falls Park. It will go in front of what is the new hatchery facility that's being built right now, in front of the office building, and then the section that we're working on, and the section that this talk is really about, is it will go along the old rail bed through Tumwater Falls Park and connect with Historical Park. So I have some handouts. I have 50 of them. So some of you may have to share. So if you're here with a spouse, significant other, friend, if you could share and make sure everybody at least gets to see this, that would be great. And I hope you brought your glasses because it has a lot of detail and some of the writing is very small. So all told, what this trail does is it connects several neighborhoods. It connects 5 public parks. It connects the city's golf course. It connects the business district, really connecting everyone throughout Tumwater on one trail system. And it says multimodal. That means you can walk on it, you can run on it, you can push a stroller on it, you can ride a bike on it, you can skateboard on it. Anything that's non-motorized, and a method of transportation, you can do it on this trail. The mayor mentioned that we've been planning this a long time. This trail was first identified in 1987 in the Thurston Regional Thurston County Trail Plan and in the Tumwater Parks Plan. A vision to have a trail along the Deschutes River. Now, of course, at that time, the city didn't own Pioneer Park. It didn't own the golf course. Large sections of that would have been impossible at that time. But now, with the expansion of the city and the expansion of our park system, we own most of the land that the trail is going to be built on. So really working steadily on this for about the last 10 years, trying to see it come to reality, searching for grant money. As the mayor said, obtaining some federal grant money to do this next section of trail. It's a very expensive project, and you may think that, geez, you just throw down some asphalt on a flat surface and you're good to go. And while that does seem fairly easy, when you really get into the construction of the trail, and particularly this trail where it crosses sensitive areas, it's in wetland buffers, it's through a park that exists, it's along roadways, we have to build bridges. It's just incredible how fast that cost adds up. So we're going to do this trail in sections, and the Tumwater Falls section is the next piece that we're going to be doing. Later this summer, you'll also see a section along Tumwater Valley Drive, working with the developer of the Craft Brewing and Distilling Center, which is just south of E Street. We're working with them to build a portion of that trail for us. So you'll see a piece of the Deschutes Valley Trail appear on the east side of what is now Tumwater Valley Drive in front of the Craft Brewing and Distilling Center. The plan is to connect that trail with Tumwater Falls Park Trail and take it all the way down to the golf course parking lot before extending it further. So how do we figure out we needed this trail? I can tell you the city has done numerous surveys throughout the years. In the last 5 years, we've done 2 major surveys. Part of that was to develop a plan for the city's Metropolitan Park District, which was an issue that we put before voters last November to fund parks and create a permanent funding source for park development and park support. And if you voted for that, I would say thank you. That did pass. Some of that money will be used for this trail, and we'll try to leverage that money with state and federal grant money so that we can double what we can do and best use the available funds that we have. So in asking voters, really Tumwater residents, what do you want in your park system? There are a number of things that come out. But typically trails, trail access, trails that connect things like neighborhoods and businesses is always at or near the top of the list of priorities for what people say they want. So that's one of the drivers behind this, as well as providing those connections to businesses, to residents, to bring neighborhoods together, to get people out and get them active and have recreational things for people to do. Little explanation about what the trail is. There you go. It's a flat piece of asphalt that's on a flat piece of ground there. It's generally 10 feet wide, 10 feet wide asphalt so that you can ride a bike both directions and not hit each other. Same with wheelchairs or skateboards or anything else. It's wide enough to accommodate two-way traffic. The sides of the trail, each side it has a 2-foot gravel shoulder. That's for those who may be running, jogging, or doing other things where they don't want the particularly hard asphalt surface and a little bit of cushioning. It also provides a buffer on the sides of the trail that makes it seem a little wider than it is. So in most areas, it's 10 feet wide. It's never smaller than that. In some areas, like in Tumwater Falls Park, it's wider than that to create more of a feeling of openness and safety. I mentioned several times that it goes through the city's golf course. So anybody concerned, anybody think, well, geez, how do you put a trail next to a golf course and not have people get hit with golf balls? Here's how that works. Along the golf course sections, on the right side here is the trail. On the left side is the cart path, the golf cart path. So in the sections where the trail borders the golf course fairways, we'll be replacing the golf cart path and building this new section where there will be a path, a fence with an overhang so that people can't get hit by errant golf balls. And then the trail will be on the opposite side. There's also, maybe that's a little porcupine there, I'm not sure what that is, but about every fifth trail section there's a wildlife pass-through on the fence. The golf course is loaded with wildlife, and they go back and forth from the river to the golf course to the woods that surround that area, and we don't want to totally fence that off and trap them either inside or outside, so there's a little pathway for them there. Just a couple of pictures about other things that you see on the trail. It's going to go along natural areas. It's going to go along forested areas. The way that we've laid it out, we don't have to disturb a lot of these areas or cut down trees or do things like that. So there's a couple of different viewing opportunities as you go through. Wetlands, forested wetlands, water features near the golf course. This is where there's going to be a bridge. If you're familiar with Fairway, at that time it was Fairway 10. We have since changed that. It's Fairway number 1. Near the Valley Athletic Club, we'll be crossing this waterway with a bridge just before M Street. So kind of an exciting part of the trail is we have a lot of stories to tell with this project. The trail incorporates a lot of things that the city believes in, a lot of things that people are interested in, and a lot of things that we want to tell people about. So there'll be interpretive signs really the whole way telling people what's going on or what has gone on the trail or near the trail that they're on. And I listed some of those here. Obviously, it's recreation, health, and fitness. We want people to get out. We want people to be active. We want people to participate with other people, with families, and things like that. We have stories to tell about the environment. This goes through, like I said, wetlands, wetland buffers. It goes by the river. It goes through older growth forest. It goes through forest that's transitioning from maybe alder to fir to cedar. There's the wildlife element to tell. Certainly we have a story to tell about the Deschutes River, and it follows the river from city border to city border. There's the story of the salmon and how salmon got in a river with a waterfall. And the story, obviously, of hatcheries. And we've been working with the Olympia Tumwater Foundation and the Fish and Wildlife Department for probably 20 years on the hatchery or the capture facility that they're working on right now in Tumwater Falls Park, and a new rearing hatchery that they've been working on for a very long time that they would like to construct at Pioneer Park. This trail will connect those two hatchery facilities, and that's a tremendous story to tell, not only from the fish side, but also from the tribe side, from the orca whale side, from the environmental side. There's a lot of stories involved with fish. On the water issue, we can talk about artesian water and what artesian water has meant to the city of Tumwater and maybe specifically the Olympia Brewery. There's the aquifer that's underneath the golf course where all the brewery water came from. And also the city's, one of the city's main well sources is in the Palermo Valley, which is right by this trail. Reclaimed water, that's a story. We irrigate the Tumwater Valley Golf Course with reclaimed water from the Lot wastewater treatment plant. That's a story in itself. And stormwater, because the golf course serves as a stormwater treatment facility really for the whole city. Everything from Cleveland Avenue west to the golf course and everything from I-5 east to the golf course. As they say, what flows downhill, it's water. It all gets trapped and funneled through the golf course to infiltrate and be cleaned before it eventually ends up either in the aquifer or back in the Deschutes River. So there's a story to tell there. Also, we work a lot with native tribes, mostly the Squaxins, but some with the Nisqually and some with the Chehalis tribes. And they have stories to tell there, too, about their history and how this area has developed with their help and with their activities and the things that they did on the land. Now, as I've gone through all that, you're probably saying, well, geez, you forgot the most important part about why you're here today. Also, we have a story to tell about history and the railroad. So, since I can't just ramble on forever about history and the railroad, I did write some stuff down, and I'll go through that with you now. I had been talking a little bit about the tribes, and this trail project really focuses on transportation and what trails are and the transportation that has occurred in this area in the past. And that goes way back to the earliest times when the coastal Salish tribes were here and using the mouth of the Deschutes River and really the coast all the way out to Shelton. After that, it was the Hudson Bay Company, and as time went on, finally the settlers in 1845 came to Tumwater and again found, as they ended their version of the Oregon Trail in Tumwater, the value of the Deschutes River and really built a history there. So the next big step in transportation came when it was time to build the railroad. And here's where I go back to my notes now. The Northern Pacific Railroad in the early 1870s was working on the railroad, and they were making plans to come this way from the Columbia River. Obviously, every city along that possible route was very interested in having the railway come through their town. Prosperity and business and people follow the railroad at that time. Olympia and Tumwater felt pretty confident. You know, here we are, we're at the end of Puget Sound. Olympia is the capital or the territorial capital of what would become Washington State. Obviously, they're going to come here to make the terminus of the Pacific Northern Railroad. Land speculators came, prices on land went up. Tumwater even passed an ordinance, was it, Don? A right-of-way? Okay, yeah. They approved right-of-way for the railroad in 1872. And what happened? The railroad decided, hey, let's go through Tenino, and we'll put the terminus in Tacoma. Tough news for everybody in Olympia and Tumwater, and people were somewhat outraged about that and how it didn't happen. Concerned that was going to be the end of really our community here, both Olympia, maybe a state capital, and Tumwater. What would our future be without the railroad? So an attitude of, well, if they're not going to do it, then let's build our own railroad. We'll build one from here to Tenino, and we'll connect with them if they're not going to connect with us. Don Trosper had sent me a great quote from a meeting that happened in 1874 with people from Olympia and Tumwater at the Columbian Hall. Speeches were given by Hazard Stevens and Governor Ferry and all the prominent people of the time. But the quote that I have from Don was from Judge McFadden, who said, "Without railroad connections, Olympia cannot stand still. She cannot go forward even slowly. She must retrograde, and in a few years, her dilapidated dwelling will become the fit abode for owls." So what they did was businessmen, farmers, politicians, put aside their differences for a while. It sounded like they were very inspired to begin work. They started to try to sell bonds, and they began work on building a 15-mile narrow gauge railway from downtown Olympia through Tumwater and to Tenino. It went really well at first. They knocked out 5 miles of the grade in the first day. People were very excited. But as time went on, interest waned, money wasn't coming in, the bonds weren't selling very well. The county commissioners were somewhat concerned and pressing for it to be finished. And in the end, they sold stocks, and they got more funds, and they finally got it finished. Now, they built a narrow gauge railway, which is unlike a normal passenger or freight train rail. The rails are only 36 inches wide. So easier to build, cheaper to build, and something that they could get done. So really a pretty incredible project, and they were able to do it. So the line, as it was described to me, began down at the Percival Docks, so down in Olympia, up what is now Deschutes Parkway, and where Historical Park is, and then up through Tumwater Falls Park, where this trail is going to go, and then basically along what is now Highway 99 all the way to Tenino. It had a couple of stops along the way, and we'll talk about that. The Tumwater Depot was at the Middle Falls at the Gelback Washington Flour Mill. Picture. There it is right there. Thanks to the Olympia Tumwater Foundation for that photo. I have some prices if you wanted to ride this train. If you were starting in downtown Olympia and you wanted to go to Tumwater, it would cost you 12 cents. If you wanted to go to the Bush Station, which was out near the airport in the Bush Homestead, that was 50 cents. 75 cents to go a little further to what was called Spurlock. And if you wanted to go all the way to Tenino, it would cost you $1. It was also $1 a ton for freight if you were shipping things back and forth. Unless they were extra bulky like hay and things like that, then it would cost you more, but I don't have the exact figure on that. There were some problems along the way. Obviously, anytime there's new infrastructure, business associations, people working together, things like that, problems with cows on the rail line, animals being killed, things like that. For years, the train didn't have a light in the front of it, and the staff on the train would actually hold out a lantern as they went and try to light the way. And as I understand it, a women's group at the time decided they would host a community dinner to raise funds, and they did do that, and they raised enough funds to buy a light for the front of the train. The train ran for several years, and it eventually became the owned by the Port Townsend, part of and owned by the Port Townsend Southern Line, which ran from Olympia to Port Townsend. That was in 1890. And then later, the Northern Pacific bought the line from the Port Townsend Southern, and at that time, other rail lines were coming into town, so that it wasn't so needed or unique. And the initial rail line was abandoned in 1916. There's my history lesson for today. So, how many people are familiar where this rail line is? Have you seen it in Tumwater Falls Park? Okay, you're going to go there next time and you're going to look and you're going to go, well, geez, it's right there. It's very obvious. So let me tell you a little bit about it. I gave you that handout that hopefully you can kind of see, and I would guess that almost none of you can see this. When you get home, if you look at that a little bit closer, you can see really the details of what I'm trying to tell you. Do you have one? Like a stick pointer? Oh, nice. Dangerous. Let's start on the northern end, which would be right over there, in reality over there. Historical Park is down here, and we have a trail that goes from The Capitol Lake Interpretive Center, Capitol Lake Trail, goes under Interstate 5, and it goes into Historical Park, where we've connected to it, and we have that 10-foot wide asphalt trail that weaves through Historical Park, and it comes up what used to be Simmons Street. We took that street out, and we made it part of the Deschutes Valley Trail several years ago, and it comes up to, right now, Deschutes Parkway. So the new trail through Tumwater Falls Park is going to connect right there at the top of the Simmons Trail and Deschutes Parkway and start its journey through Tumwater Falls Park. Yeah, I'll go through some details on that as we go through this presentation, but it goes all the way through the park, all the way down to where the park office is today. That's the end of this project. So the trail follows the park all the way through to basically the parking lot on the other end. Another thing to note on your little sheet, the railroad grade is in the middle on that little cutout there. This is the railroad grade. On the top is Deschutes Parkway, so it's Deschutes Parkway. There's a hillside. There's the railroad grade where the new trail will be. There's a hillside, and this is the existing trail that loops around in Tumwater Falls Park. So the new trail is in between the existing trail on the bottom and Deschutes Parkway on the top. Question?
Could you point out the Schmidt House on that map, just off the map?
Center top left, upper left.
Right here?
That's the bridge across.
It's out of the, it's the actual mansion's out of the.
Yeah, it's over here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be up here.
Thank you.
And really, as I go through this, if you have a question, I'm fine. Just raise your hand and let me know. Typical with parks, we'll put in a kiosk. This kiosk, if you were standing in the park and looking at the office, the office building front door, just standing here and looking at the office, you would see what will be a kiosk that will be there. The kiosk is for the city to put up information and historical information and upcoming events and things like that, but also for the Olympia Tumwater Foundation and their operation of the park there to put up things that the public needs to know or may want to know. So typical in parks, this is the same exact thing over there. That's in Deschutes Valley Park. If you ever want to see what those look like. So very similar. Now if you're still standing here looking at that and you turn to your left, so you just rotated left, this is the Falls Terrace restaurant. This is the existing trail that goes down to the Loop Trail. The new Deschutes Valley Trail goes right in between those two. So next time you're there, stand here and look that way, right in front of the Falls Terrace deck, and you'll see the flat grade that goes right through there, and that's where the trail is going to start on this end. I talked a little bit about transportation and how we felt transportation was really a prime factor in this trail, something we wanted to key on, something we wanted to talk about. And I'm not going to read all this fancy text here, but down here, here's kind of the themes we were working on, and going way back to the beginning with Native Americans walking through the woods and natural areas in this area. Canoes came about. Then it was the wagon and the horse and the end of the Oregon Trail. Then we had boat traffic in all the way into what was the historic brewery building. The bicycle was popular at that time. Then came the railroad, which we're talking about today. Early automobile was shortly thereafter, and then came the freeway and modern transportation. And now we're going back to a trail system where the bicycle and walking culture is really back. So it's kind of a whole circle of life thing for transportation, and that's what we're trying to hit on here. So this project went through many revisions, and it went through the city's historical commission for what we call a certificate of appropriateness. several consultants and architects involved in how we were going to tell the story about what happened in Tumwater Falls Park and talk about the railroad. So some of the interpretive elements, I've listed out some of the interpretive elements that we're going to include on the trail. And there are two of these. They're called accordion walls. They're made out of metal. And just like they sound, it's an accordion wall. And when you look from one direction, you see one story or one picture. And when you look from the other direction, you see a different story or a different picture. I've seen these in Boise, Idaho. They're in various places around the country. Very cool, and a really cool way to tell what could be a complicated story and kind of make it fun. So as you're going one way on the trail, you see this story. You're going the other way, you see a different story. We're going to do that twice on this trail. We're kind of still, oh, go ahead.
You said you worked with the tribes. Are there any parts of this that relate the story of the people that lived here originally?
Not yet.
Okay.
But there will be. We're not quite done, and that was right where I was going.
Right.
Some of this is still conceptual. We haven't solidly nailed down exactly which person or which event we're talking about. Well, we have those general themes, and the tribe is certainly an important piece of that.
I wanted to let you know there's recently been a rewriting of the acknowledgement that the Squaxins developed. It says this is the original home of the Deschutes people.
Right, we have that.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. So as an example, we're talking about people who was important at that time in Tumwater, not just business or industry or politics or whatever, but who really stood out as doing significant things in Tumwater. So we had Leopold Schmidt, obviously a big piece. Our first mailman, which may eventually change to our first postmaster general, who was a woman, Eva Hewitt. One of our first teachers. We have a land developer, a guy that climbed Mount Rainier very early on. Talking about oyster farmers, a cyclist, and as it turns out, there were a couple of very prominent cyclists in Tumwater racing at what we had a velodrome at that time, racing bicycles and racing long distance. And that's kind of a cool story to tell. This particular cyclist also worked on the railroad as a job, and he rode his bicycle in his spare time. And then local residents who were important people. And this is a picture of the train that ran on those tracks. So that's one option for those. This is the other one. Other options, we talk about what were important structures. We have mills like the sawmill, the power plant, that was down at the base of the falls, what the port was doing, lumber. Tumwater Lumber Company was where Tumwater Falls Park is, the Capitol building, the brewery, the flour mill, and a dairy out on the Bush Farm, I believe. So we're still working those out and what those are going to be, but there's a whole bunch of stories that we can tell in a very small space on these type of sites. The trail has a few sections where there's a railing because of, as I showed you in your little picture, that little inset. That's a kind of a steep hill, and then we have a trail, and then we have another steep hill and a trail. So in order to widen the rail bed to accommodate our 14 feet of trail surface, we have to do some cut and some fill along that. That creates spaces where we need to prevent dirt and rock from sloughing off and covering the trail. So we have to put in some kind of a retaining wall. And then when you create a retaining wall, you're creating some height and something for somebody to fall off of. So we have to put up a rail. So in order to do that in kind of a cool way, we decided, well, let's continue this railroad theme. And in certain areas, we'll put laser cut metal along the railing and tell another story. So in this section of railing, and this is in front of the Falls Terrace restaurant section, we have a timeline and a little train on the rail so that you can look down on the railing and see, well, geez, you know, in 1873 they started building this thing, and then here's where it went, and here's the things that happened, and here's where it finally ended. So a little educational piece and sort of an artistic decoration on the railing. Similarly, there's 4 benches for people to stop and rest or sit and just look at, really look at Tumwater Falls Park and the beauty there and the Deschutes River. It also gives us another opportunity to tell some stories. So this is Charles Bell, the guy that rides the bike that also worked for the railroad. Whether he ends up being the final person that gets to be on a bench or not, I don't know yet. But he's got a great story to tell, and while people are sitting here or standing, they can learn a little bit more about the history of the area. It's also a good photo opportunity. The whole theme around this, the trail and the trail signage, which is new to us, is around railroad. So we decided, well, geez, if we're going to go with that theme, let's go all the way. And let's use signs that look like they would have been railroad signs. So we'll have a sign that says, you know, if you're going this way, you're going to Tenino. If you're going that way, you're going to the Olympia Station. We'll show where the stop was, where the Gelbach flour mill was, so that people understand if I took the train, this is where I got on or this is where I got off. And we'll have that story there for people to learn about that. That sign will also be along the trail, and I know it sounds like a bunch of signage, but it all fits, trust me. Tells people different ways to get to Olympia and different ways to get to Tenino, how far it is and how long it will take you. So if you're going on a horse or you're walking on foot or you're going by train, that's all listed there, so you know what it would have been. Way in the back. I think prices are somewhere, but that is a good point. Also, very few people, or maybe not this crowd, but very few people understand what a narrow gauge railroad is, unless maybe you had Lionel trains and they had the in-scale train that was a little tiny one. This is the difference between regular rails, the gray, and the darker color is the narrow gauge rail. It was quite a bit narrower. Took a special engine, took special cars. It was a totally different railroad than the irregular freight railroad was at that time. So we wanted to show that somehow, and we have 2 different options right now, but we're going to somehow put something in the asphalt on the trail for a section that looks like this and explain what narrow gauge railroad is, so that people will actually have a visual to look at and a little description about what narrow gauge rail was and why they did it. Similarly, kind of railroad tracky, we have some rumble strips that look like railroad tracks on both ends of the trail, so that if people are riding bikes, they know they're coming to a point where either the trail transitions to a different piece or the trail's coming to an end, and they need to make sure they slow down and watch out for other pedestrians. Back to retaining walls and holding up dirt and rock. We had a little bit of a quandary about how we were going to do that and what would look appropriate within Tumwater Falls Park. We wanted to make sure we were cognizant of what had been done in the park in the past, what the history was there for construction. We didn't want to bring in something new like retaining wall blocks from Home Depot and throw it up in the park and have it stand out as, geez, that doesn't fit in this environment. So we went through the park and took kind of an assessment of what was there already. And what you find right now in Tumwater Falls Park is the Tenino sandstone blocks. Then this was, I believe, from the old powerhouse. And when that was torn down, these blocks were brought up and put in the park. You have dry stack boulders, and that's just basalt rocks that have been stacked. Those rocks were and are everywhere around town and all up Tumwater Hill. Easily accessible and easy to build with. Not overly attractive, but they do the job. And then this dry stack Columbia granite, which is the newer walls on the trail. Absolutely fabulous job that guy did in building those walls. Very impressive. Also very, very expensive. So we had particularly the biggest wall is right in front of the Falls Terrace restaurant, which also means that it's front and center in the park. So it's something that everybody's going to see. So we really took some time and thought about, what would it be that could tie this in? We're working with the existing park infrastructure, but we're also talking about the railroad. What was done here in history, and what did the railroad do when they had to build a retaining wall? Well, often what they did was they would use cribbing, which is really just a series of boards fashioned together with rock behind it. that would hold up a trestle or an entryway to a trestle or something like that. This was an attractive option, not overly expensive, somewhat easy to maintain, very sturdy. So we went searching for ways in which we could say, hey, there was some cribbing used here. This was historically accurate. Is this something that's going to fit in this park? And looking at historical pictures, we did find that down at the historic brew house on the water, they did use wood to build retaining walls and walls on the water. So that fit. And then studying a little further, the Port Townsend Southern line, exactly what we need, used wood cribbing along Puget Sound. So that's a railway that ties into this railway, and we thought that was an excellent fit. So I would also add that the mayor kind of liked the cribbing idea. So we really tried to go with that.
Blame me.
Yeah. So here's how it works. It's not actual structural cribbing because that's a whole nother construction project. But what we decided to do was we'll take this right here. This is a trail section. This is gravel underneath the trail. This is a series of wire boxes that contain rocks, and that's called a gabion wall. If you've gone over White Pass, I think I-90 has them now. Along the sides of the road on the pass, they have these giant wire cages that they just fill with rocks. Gabion basket is what that is. Very good at supporting weight, stable, somewhat inexpensive. It's a great retaining wall. Not overly attractive, though, depending on what kind of rocks you put in it. So what's going to happen is that the gabion wall will really be the structure to hold up the earth and the trail. But we're going to face that, which just put on the front of it, the Columbia granite dry stack, and it's not going to be actually supporting the trail, although it will have that look to it. So there'll be the Columbia on the bottom. So the rocks that you see in the park now, they're very nice. And the same guy, we're looking to try to use the same guy that did those rocks to do these rocks. And then on top of that, we're going to have the wood cribbing. So you'll look through the wood cribbing, which is just the wood beams, and you'll see the gabion basket full of rocks. So it looks like it's actual wood cribbing, but it's actually just a face on the front of the trail. But it's going to look very cool. So in the end, you'll see this. You'll see vegetation. You'll see the stacked granite, then you'll see the wood cribbing, and then there's the trail with the railing that has a little train on it. Get it? Okay, so there's a closer picture of it. This is a character of John Friedman right here.
Oh, yeah. Looks just like him.
So there you go. That's just he almost smiled.
Yeah.
Question?
Yes.
Do you know what kind of wood you'll use?
I don't.
Termite resistant?
Yeah, it would have to be yeah, something like that. Probably not overly chemically treated, but yeah, haven't even thought of that yet. Not that far. So if you're standing on the bridge, looking back towards the Falls Terrace restaurant, this is what that's going to look like. Because this is our artist's rendering of what that looks like. So bridge, you're standing on the bridge right here, looking back towards the Falls Terrace. This is the existing trail. There's vegetation, granite, crib wall, and the Deschutes Valley Trail with the rail that has a little train on it.
Native species plant garden, is that?
Well, actually, let's talk about that a little bit. We, as part of this project, the native garden was in the way. It's right here. So we worked with the foundation and the people associated with the creation of that garden and really the maintenance of it to move it. And we came up with funds that we gave the foundation to pay to be able to move the garden. So the garden will now be in front of the office building. And if you look at the work that's going on there, that's happening right now. It's being moved. It's going to be better. It's a better place for the plants. It's going to be more attractive, and I think it really adds to that entrance area of the park. So kind of in wrapping up, I just wanted to throw up a little more information about who's supporting this project, who we've worked with, who we've talked to. Obviously, the Tumwater City Council supports it, and the Tumwater Parks Board, the Olympia Tumwater Foundation Board, Thurston Regional Planning Council, a lot of local community groups, regional organizations, and advocacy groups, both for walking, running, biking, exercise. The entire trail is ADA accessible, so it's wheelchair friendly the whole way up and down. Not easy to do, but through some crafty engineering and some design issues, we were able to achieve that. So it's a trail for every single person that comes to town. We've got letters of support from a variety of groups and clubs and neighborhoods that see the value of the trail. The Woodland Trail Greenway Association and the Wanderers Hiking Club have already agreed to donate a number of things besides cash, volunteer labor, tree planting, trail construction, and actual plant material. And that wraps it up. So it's 20, almost 30 years in planning. It's about 2.5 miles long. It goes from border to border along the Deschutes River, from city border to city border. It connects a whole bunch of neighborhoods. It connects 5 parks. It connects the city's golf course. We think it's just a fantastic project, and we're going to do everything we can to get it done as quickly as we can. So this next section is probably next spring. We're hoping to do it this summer. We have a number of issues in, not so much in permitting, although there's some. We had some issues when acquiring a trail easement. We acquired a trail easement from the foundation, but we also had to acquire a trail easement from the owner of the property under the Falls Terrace restaurant, who, unbeknownst to many, had passed away. And it fell to the heirs, and it was a whole long process to go countrywide and track down all the heirs of the owner that had owned that property and had them all sign a form and say, yes, we'll do this easement. And really it was about 1,400 square feet that we needed. So that is finally done, but by the time we do bidding and contracting and everything else, we'll be past the construction season for this year. Once it starts raining, there's no way we can do this project, so it will probably be next spring. So with that, I would say thank you and take any questions. There isn't any of it right now. It has not changed at all. But I would invite you to go to the park and take a look. Look at the Boston Street Bridge, and you can see the cutout in the bridge where the train went through. Once you know it's there, it's very obvious that there was a train track there.
Where do you get on it at Pioneer Park?
Pioneer Park, you'll get on it really just off the golf course. Just off the parking lot. But it's not there yet. That's probably the last section. It's the most expensive section.
Because I've never seen it over there.
Nope, not yet. Just on a piece of paper.
Within the existing or the previous right-of-way of the railroad, how much of that is rail banked?
Geez, I don't know that any of it is. Do you know, Pete?
No, none of it, as far as I know, none.
Okay.
What would it take to build the trail all the way to Tenino, and what governments would be involved?
Wow. The question was, what would it take to get it to Tenino, and who would be involved? Certainly, the county would be involved in that. That's a heck of a lot of right-of-way to try to acquire to go that way. Probably. Really, the alternative that we're looking at is to connect to the Olympia Greenway Trail, which is going to end just on the other side of the Capitol Way Bridge that goes over I-5. And we've been working with Olympia on ways to connect from Historical Park to their trail. If we can connect to the Greenway Trail, that connects to the Chehalis Western Trail, which goes to Tenino. So we are working with the county, we are working with Olympia and with Lacey and trying to coordinate how can we connect our cities with this trail system. So things are moving along. It's just kind of slow.
Is that Greenway Trail existing?
Yes. In the back? To Hancourt, yeah.
Some of the tracks been removed, going across 66. Is that something you're associated with?
The county has taken the lead on that. The tracks that go to the Hancourt business, the plastics, probably isn't going anywhere. Those tracks will probably remain. We have had talks off and on with the railroad about joint use and can we put a trail in the railroad corridor, as far away from the tracks as possible, but within the rail corridor. They haven't been very excited about that. That's a liability that they don't want to take on and really don't feel like they need to. So I don't know if you've ever worked with the railroad, but it's sometimes difficult. So it's something we're looking at. We are talking with the county about it. They have done a tremendous job of acquiring trail corridor from the Black Lake Park south. But from there north, it gets tougher. We would like to take that all the way to up to Percival Creek and to Mottman as a trail corridor. John Friedman. I don't know. Things are pretty tight county budget-wise, but I'm not sure what they have set aside for that. Thank you. John?
How much of this was city funded?
This piece, about half. Yep.
Has funding been secured for the rest of the trail? And if so, what is the next phase? Construction start of A2?
Yeah, it has not been secured. We'll be applying mostly for state grants. There's a lot of strings that come with federal grants, a lot. So sometimes it's worth it and sometimes it's not to take that money. And it's not just one-time stuff that you have to do. It's in perpetuity. You're reporting and doing all of these things. So we really have to take a hard look at where the money's coming from and what comes with it. But we're not shy about asking, and we'll be all over asking for matching money. Now, because we passed the Park District measure, we have about $2 million set aside within that funding to go to this trail. So we'll try to leverage that and turn it once or twice over and get enough to do major sections. All told, this project is going to easily be, brace yourself now, about $10 million to do this whole trail. Incredibly expensive, very time consuming, but that's what it is. So we think it's that important. Now, the only piece you're going to find right now is through Historical Park. So from Deschutes Parkway through Historical Park, where it connects to the Capitol Lake Trail, that's the only piece that's done right now.
Southern terminus, how far south and what could connect to the southern end of the trail?
It terminates at Pioneer Park, so Henderson Boulevard. It's a tough go from there. We have looked at land continuing along the Deschutes Valley. There's some trust-owned land along the river there and some privately owned land. I don't know that they have any interest in having the public on their property, but as we move that way, we'll pursue that. We've also looked at going up Henderson Boulevard and trying to go back towards the airport with the trail. There's some opportunity with other public agencies that may be acquiring land to do that. So we're always out with feelers trying to figure out who's doing what and what might be possible. Or if a developer comes and says, hey, I want to put in a housing development, we jump on that and say, well, as part of your development, we would like to put a trail through here before you put your houses up. Things like that.
Is there a plan to expand parking options at Tumwater Falls Park at the access point of A1 section?
Tumwater Falls Park parking is difficult. There's not a lot of room there. About the only option is to take out more of the grass and put in parking, and I don't know that that's acceptable to the foundation board or really anyone. We are looking at and hopefully changing the exit to the park onto Deschutes Parkway. We'd like to make that non-vehicle entrance exit. so that you don't. So you don't come out of the park facing north and trying to look south and see who's coming on. That's kind of a dangerous situation. We'd like to make the C Street entrance both in and out, and we'll work with the foundation on that. If that happens, there might be some parking revisions or removal in addition or something like that. But really, we're just kind of out of room there for more parking. Similar to Historical Park, which has 64 parking spaces and frequently hundreds of people down there. So it's tough. It's tough to have parks in the floodplain and limited parking. Parking problems, I always try to tell my staff, parking problems is a good problem to have. That means people want to come and do and see what we have. It's better than the alternative, but it is frustrating and difficult. Pioneer Park, however, has 500 parking spaces, so we're good there. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.